All right, we are recording. Welcome to She Blaze, where we're bringing you cannabis culture from a woman's point of view. And as always, here to elevate the cannabis industry, I'm one of your hosts, Ice Dawson, Cannabis Socialite.
And I am Dasheeda Dawson, the WeedHead. Hey guys.
Hey! And on today's episode of She Blaze, a huge hemp farm files bankruptcy. People of color are still battling for social equity, and the USDA launches hemp farm insurance program.
Woo woo. We got a lot to talk about today, as always. I feel like one thing I love about shooting a weekly show in the cannabis space is that cannabis never disappoints. There's always something going on, and there's always some tea that you are finding for us. So before we get into those hot topics, though, I want to kick things off with the high of the week. Okay. So my high of the week, I am headed to Chicago, and I'm so excited because the Minorities for Medical Marijuana just had a recent boot camp, and all of their students received my workbook as part of that boot camp, and it was in Chicago. It was a cultivation and processing boot camp, and we are headed back with the Sharing Success in Cannabis book tour next week on the 26th to Chicago. Shout out to Elevated Education Online, Chicago Normal, SMART, Minorities for Medical Marijuana, the Harris School of Public Policy, and all of these great regional partners that are just helping us kick this off. So I'm high on how many people have really worked together to make sure that we come there in style.
True. Well, I see your high of the week hasn't been cannabis all season. Cool. But my high of the week is really I am smoking on something called Donuts. It's by Body and Mind out here in Nevada. So it's a nice little piney cannabis hybrid, to be honest. It's not much of a sativa, but it's a hybrid.
Gotcha. And how and are you enjoying it? You said it's a piney hybrid.
Yeah, I mean, it's okay. It's nothing to really write home about, but it's one of the better brands in Nevada, I will honestly say, as far as like the type of cannabis you're getting. The packaging is still a little strugglesome, and it's really dry out here, so your cannabis gets dry. But, I think that my favorite kind of cannabis is like when it's basically getting picked off the tree and it get cured and then it's directly to me. That's my favorite part. The one that takes too long and full of testing sometimes is like less than thriller.
Well, to be honest, I haven't talked about a cannabis high because, to be truthful, I've been traveling so much, and all I know right now is that I have to keep a good cannabinoid regimen, and I shout out Lock and Key Remedy because I'm able to do so with the tincture that we sell on the line on our website. But every market is different, and not every market is desirable. Even in a legal market, sometimes it's hard for me to find strains that's going to work with the way I need to work for me. Right now, I'm actually back in Atlanta, and it's raining here, honey, and it is just terrible. But we in Georgia, so there's limited things that I can be high on in terms of cannabis as far as that's concerned. But I also think it's important to highlight that the cannabis industry is beyond just consumption. There's so many things that we can be proud of and excited about, and so that's why I've been pushing it, especially as we start to, round out my birthday month. It's kind of like, wait, I have 4 weeks of birthday highs, and yes, they are not about strains. They're about some real tangible things we are doing in the industry.
Okay. Well, that definitely could lead us to our hot topic because we're starting it on a high note and really just highlighting Los Angeles County District Attorney Jackie Lacey for dismissing 66,000 marijuana convictions.
That is amazing. So I just have to give a round of applause and shout out, that district attorney who's making the moves that we need to see in the industry.
Yes, and so these cannabis convictions have been dated back all the way into the 1960s. There's also additional 4,000 misdemeanors that were dismissed across the 10 cities of Los Angeles. So they're doing some big stuff over there.
Wow, yeah, and big stuff that I hope that we get to see on the East Coast as folks start to legalize across the board, whether it's Connecticut, New York, New Jersey, or Pennsylvania. My hope is that while these governors are creating a summit, yes, we should be concerned about tax revenue, but we definitely need to be figuring out how do we dismiss convictions, how do we rectify the past and the harms that have been put on certain communities as a result of cannabis being wrongfully prohibited.
Absolutely. Now, this comes with a partnership with a nonprofit organization called Code for America, which they created an algorithm that identifies convictions eligible to be dismissed under 64, Proposition 64. Now, this Clear My Record technology was offered for free to 58 state district attorneys. So, it is about advocacy and lending a helping hand that help these convictions get dismissed. And they've actually on record have over 85,000 convictions that have been dismissed across the 5 counties.
Wow. So the quick question I have is then if 58 state district attorneys have received it and this is something you use for free, why do we only have 5 counties that have implemented? And so that's, of course, one of those moments, right? But I also have to commend Clear My Record because, a lot of people are jumping into the industry for really money and that's it. And there's no mission. And so this feels like mission driven social entrepreneurship. That's what we called it in business school, where you are creating something that you know is a useful tool, not just to make millions and billions of dollars, but to actually help people. And in turn, it probably will make them billions of dollars, especially as other states start trying to figure out how do they leverage Clear My Record when they see that our largest adult use state is seeing some success from it. But at the same time, I also think that they're going to have to obviously do some work in retooling and figuring out what the algorithm needs to be, because every state, unfortunately, has a different thing that they consider dismissible, right? That they're voting on in the regulation. And then I would say New York is probably the most complicated because New York has arrested more people than any other state in the country. I will say that every episode. So to remind our governor that we have a lot of work to do to rectify the harms of the past. And this is one of them. So, I talk a lot about the DMV, the Social Security Office and Unemployment Office in New York, especially New York City, downstate area. It is not cute. And I cannot even imagine what it would look like for people to attempt to try to expunge or get their records cleared. As a matter of just fact, also, technically, New York doesn't have expungement in the legal sense, but you can get your records sealed and or, records could be dismissed. Those are two different things separate from expungement. But either way, it's the steps that we need to go in the right direction, and Clear My Record clearly can help with that.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with what you're saying. And I do believe that a lot more areas can use it. I mean, it's a great base. So, like, just like everyone wants to use Colorado's market as their base for legalization, yeah, let's use this as a base too. And then continuously create algorithms. I mean, Instagram changes the algorithm every month, you guys. So, it's not that complicated once you have a strong foundation.
That's true, but you know how many people hate Instagram because they changed that algorithm? When it comes time for us to see this federally legal, there will need to be something that can do this on a federal level. And I believe that this is the type of organization that could lead the way. And so this is social, like I said, social entrepreneurship defined. Kudos to this organization. And I'm excited to see more wins in the future.
Definitely. And talking about some future stuff, let's move on to our hot topic number two, because the future of this hemp company right now is up in the air, child. So Jen Canna filed U.S. bankruptcy, basically, in the Eastern District of Kentucky. Now, this is really surprising because they've launched since 2014, so technically they are pioneers in the industry because they started when Kentucky allowed for its pilot program to start. Now, the company is basically asking for bankruptcy to be allowed to operate while seeking refinancing, hopefully like a $10 million loan, and just find somebody to probably buy their entity. Now, this is not coming because they want to do this. They are really filing bankruptcy because they have a $32 million combined liens on their company right now. Basically, construction companies are not happy. They did not get paid to build their Mayfield facility, which is still unfinished, that started in 2018.
Wow. Well, I mean, I took some sips because I knew I had to be like, let me clear my throat. Let me clear my throat. Where do I start? Whew. Well, let me just start with a little bit of business education. But some folks may not understand bankruptcy. By definition, and we've all played Monopoly, bankruptcy is that point when your debt is so overwhelming that you'll never come out of it. And businesses really use bankruptcy as a process to eliminate debt, to sell off the non-performing assets, and to restructure any long-term financing, and like you said, possibly bring in new equity or financing. It is essentially like hitting the reset button. And, a lot of people don't talk about it, but our current president has actually filed bankruptcy with his businesses multiple times. So it is one of those things that, from a business perspective, it is not unusual. And I don't want everyone to kind of take it again as one of those, oh my God, the cannabis space. But it does indicate mismanagement at some point, things getting out of hand. And I think that that's why I had to go, I had to do a little bit of let me clear my throat, because in this case, they have $32 million worth of debt that's coming after them. But this is a company that spent some buku dollars on their marketing in ways that don't make sense. And so I'm aligned with the Kentucky commissioner, who basically is like, listen, I wish that they had actually used some of that marketing dollars to pay their bills. That's where I feel I start to question who was managing the P&L. Just because you're creating marketing in a large way for consumer-facing marketing doesn't mean you are going to increase your B2B sales or your B2B revenue. It also doesn't mean it's going to make getting that $40 million intended facility any closer to being finished either. So I just, I have to ask, and I'm seeing and reading more as you provided the details from the CEO saying that they're blaming the ongoing issues within the regulatory environment. And I think that that's just, for lack of other words, a bit of BS. It's not just the regulatory environment. You have a choice as to how you're going to approach managing your P&L. And in this case, it clearly wasn't balanced. When you have outstanding debts or terms that you need to be met, but you're still choosing to take out pretty astronomical marketing expenses. Where did they think that this was going to be reconciled if not for expecting and planning for them to do a bankruptcy? I don't know. It seems it's subpar business planning and business management, in my opinion.
I mean, super lack of integrity, And now I'm like, I wonder what the hemp is like, like if you're not making sure that you're paying your bills on time, how do I know that you're growing this product correctly? But it is terrible. Some of the marketing things that they spent their money on is buying up a bunch of billboard state in Kentucky and being the title sponsor of the Kentucky State Fair. Yes, the Kentucky State Fair. I did not know it was the leading charge on marketing for a hemp CBD company. It's very terrible because if the judge grants this bankruptcy, what happens to $32 million, and does the construction company still get paid?
Well, the way bankruptcy tends to work is that you're probably going to get a settlement. And the reality is that, it's kind of a determining factor from the judge and from all parties involved, who gets paid out first. And so, of course, I'm sure the Kentucky Commissioner of Agriculture wants the farmers to get paid out first, because it's not just constructors. There's constructions. There's farmers that are also haven't gotten paid. This is a company that is, in my opinion, in the middle of the supply chain. With hemp, and I break this down in my book, there is a supply chain very similar to marijuana, where it still starts with the genetics and the seed and the cultivation, the farmers. And then it has to be lent into processing and manufacturing. And that is where this particular company lines up with that processing and manufacturing. And this facility that they were building was for that, in order for them to create their CBD based products. But they still are primarily looking to sell to other businesses as opposed to just consumers. I'm sure they had a mixed portfolio, consumer facing and business facing. But at the end of the day, you're not going to, without proper re-education, you're not going to all of a sudden get a population to start buying from you. While Kentucky is absolutely the hemp capital of the country as far as agriculture and cultivation is concerned, that is not where people are like thinking, oh yeah, that's where I get my CBD product. That's going to take some time, and that's still relatively new. So I'm really curious, since they were founded in 2014, what the game plan was. And did they just get too happy after the hemp farm bill and choose kind of like what state fair did they sponsor? Was it the 2019 one? And since when does the state fair have any real major outcomes for a successful business to business company in hemp? I don't see it. I'm confused, but I think a lot of these cannabis companies on the hemp and marijuana side have been doing very big PR and marketing stunts just to cover up the fact that they have really poor business management on the back end. And this doesn't surprise me in one bit, to be honest.
Girl, you are so right, because this feels like deja vu from California as we report about all these major cannabis companies having to do layoffs and, cut a lot of, basically stop all contract talks and acquisitions and really just focus on the things that they have right then and there. I think, it is hard because I feel like as the business begins to boom, people will have better business management. There'll be more integrity, but really, we're just seeing all the fallout from just some inflated sense of self as far as their business.
Sense of self, lack of understanding of the real science of cannabis, implementation of strategy based on the bro science. Girl, I could go in, and I will just end with this. It isn't a matter of feeling like people are not necessarily, I don't know, are purposely trying to have their businesses fail. I don't think that that's the case, but I think there are people who have gotten into the industry who really believe that this is just something that's going to be so easy for them to quote unquote take over, and then finding that it's not. Starting with that 280E, because all those marketing expenses, guess what? They were not able to be written off in a proper way, or in a way that we're used to in a typical business. So, girl, I mean, more to come. We're going to be watching. I am not here to necessarily wag my finger at a lot of people, because mistakes get made. Business managers are like great batters. You're going to make mistakes, and you may swing and a miss, but the reality is that it's how you correct it. I'm going to be curious to see what they're going to be doing to correct the business relationships that they have with these various companies that they have not paid.
Well, the first thing to correct it is not say it's because of the up and down in the hemp market. That's not how you become accountable for your actions. I'm gonna just tell you right now. No one wants to white label your product if they know like your stuff is not gonna come out right. Period. So the talk about rules, regulations, can we take a look at our politics right now? It's a really big hot topic because it's election year,
Yep.
but we still have a president that makes some rules and regulations around what he wants to implement money. for of the year 2021. And so our president Trump has released his fiscal budget for the 2021, but it's very interesting to say the least, as the Justice Department basically had a rider that allowed them from interfering and putting prohibition on different states and territories that have cannabis medical or adult use. And right now, he it looks like that budget is gone, and we don't know what we're going to do, because if the Justice Department decides it's going to spend its time on that, that's what they're going to do. And this rider really provided protection because it made sure that we did not spend tax dollars on regulating the legalization of those states. So I think that's this part.
Yeah, it looks like we might be having some technical difficulties, so hopefully you can still hear me. But I agree with you. I first of all, let's just break it down. What's happening? 2021. You're like, how does the president, who may not be the president in 2021, decide the budget? But that's how every business in the country is a business. It's typically run. You are doing planning for your next year during the previous year. And I did a lot of that at Target, as you remember, that oftentimes I'd be like, where we at? Oh, I'm in spring 2021, because that's what I'm talking about all the time. So that is to kind of debunk any myths. He's not overstepping any boundaries by doing so. And should he get reelected, it allows for just a very easy transition. But what I want to call out is the piece here is that the budget indicates what money can be spent on and what it can't be spent on. And there was a rider, which is basically not something part of the budget, but an additional document that indicates some rules around the Department of Justice spend. And the biggest thing was they can't use any taxpayers' money to go after. So basically, they can't send in the feds to do any policing or prevention on the ground in states that have medical marijuana programs. This is a huge protection because, like you said, the Department of Justice is going to focus on what the Department of Justice wants to focus on. And in the past, before these type of provisions were in place, we were still seeing in California primarily, but certainly in big states like Washington and Colorado, big as in cannabis states like those, we were seeing federal government come in and start to seize property and interfere with real legit licensed businesses. And unfortunately, because we are not able to not be racially biased in our country, we were seeing that those were being enforced with racially biased tactics. So, of course, you'll see in that if you're getting arrested for federal reasons, it's mostly Black and Hispanic men. Although there were still obviously white folks who did also get caught up in it, the reality is it was still disproportionate. I am a little bit concerned here because we have so much just information that shows that Trump isn't really a supporter of medical marijuana or cannabis as medicine. And I also am a little concerned because in addition to removing this rider from the budget also includes a rider, which is, again, another addendum, another piece of document that basically says if you're in Washington, D.C., this municipality or jurisdiction is not allowed to use any taxpayers' money to support a legal program, which they just voted on trying to do. So it's almost like if we can't use money to do it, then where is that money supposed to come from?
Probably whatever taxation department got the cannabis in the back office. So yes, as you're right. Donald Trump has he's actually played it real safe with the medical marijuana and the adult use market, as far as like letting us know if he's on our side or not. He's very just he's in the middle of the road. He has opinion that doesn't really have an opinion, and so he actually just had some pretty bad audio leak that basically says he quote unquote lose IQ points when smoking cannabis. So as we know, that's literally been debunked like every research, every country pretty much, that says nothing of that matter happens to you when you use cannabis. And what sucks even more is that what we're seeing along the border is really a war on drugs, as the Canada and Mexico border is patrolled heavily, and that the amount of arrests for cannabis smuggling has gone up. And what people mostly don't know about cannabis smuggling is it doesn't matter if you come with an ounce or less. It's still smuggling if you bring it across the border.
No, absolutely. There are a lot of concerns here as I, start to think about the implications. Here's all I can give as advice. For one, if you're in this industry, you absolutely have to be an advocate, and that starts with who you're voting for president. Do not sleep on the presidential candidates and their perspective on marijuana legalization, hemp. Their understanding that hemp and marijuana are both cannabis, and then also understanding that cannabis is medicine first, and it has been considered so for nearly 6 to 10,000 years at this point. And we're just kind of catching up, and that's because it's been illegal for almost 100 here in this country. So you're right. Donald Trump has been a little wishy-washy, and so there's nothing I can really stand on. What I see is words, right? He may support the States Act and feels like he will protect the legal marijuana states from federal interference, but then his actions show he's removing a rider. Some would say that maybe he's removing the rider because he feels like it's not necessary. Maybe he feels like, I've already said I support it, so it's not necessary. I have a tendency to mistrust government because I'm a Black woman, and there hasn't been any reason necessarily in my 41 years to necessarily trust the government like that. But I
Tell
think that when you are the person running it, perhaps you have a understanding, and you know that it can't happen on your watch. There's a reason that rider was put in place. It was to avoid a ruling on one end being circumvented because people like to find loopholes, and that's partly what it does. It prevents that loophole. Same as the Cole memo, which, by the way, when the first attorney general that Trump had, Sessions, came into office, essentially was saying, bump the Cole memo, right? He wasn't supporting it. And that was a protection put in place by the Obama administration to prevent the federal government or entities like the attorney general going after states and legal entities within the state. I think we should be concerned and watch actions more than words, and keep an eye on this as well.
Yes, and I think that is some great points, and it's a great way to lead us into our last hot topic of the day, which really, you know what? Like, we are watching all actions being done right now within the cannabis industry because, like I said at the beginning of the episode, people of color are still struggling for social equity, point blank, period. And a really cool article was released on NBC News, and so I felt like it was a great hot topic because we've been talking about social equity, for you wrote about it 3 years ago. So we still shouting from the top of the roof to tell y'all, like, so we need this in order, and it has to be done in the laws because the cannabis industry is not mature enough to do it on its own.
There's no industry that's mature enough to do it or do it on its own. To be honest, that's the other false thing I'd like to debunk as far as the cannabis space, which is this idea that the cannabis space is inherently more racist or more racially biased or sex bias than any other industry. It's not. The places where we have been able to push, we've had to do so with things like affirmative action, for example, right? The reality is there are certain places that we don't see ourselves in these spaces because they didn't approve necessarily affirmative action. Michigan is a state that this is an example. So
Hashtag Ox are so white.
yes. I want to just make sure that folks are at least, being honest with themselves. If you are a person who is crossing over into the industry, let me just let you know, it won't be the first time you are probably the only person of color in the room. Trust, it is not my first time at all having gone to Princeton University or even Rutgers, right? The reality is that this is just still what we struggle with in our country due to our years and years of oppression and racially biased enforcement of law. The law hasn't been enforced equally. That's just the bottom line. And I believe if something has been racially biased in its enforcement, when you are walking it back, we probably need to be racially biased as we are walking it back if we really want to see equity. And so that's been my big focus as we talk about social equity. There's a lot of people who really are like, oh, we giving handouts. I mean, like, I've had people go in, and you know what, whether you agree with me or not, there are some things that we can't argue about. We can't argue about the facts. The fact of the matter is that during the time period after Richard Nixon put in place a new law, the Controlled Substance Act. Essentially, this was an opportunity for them to go after very specific groups, which his aide now testifies to say that is the case. It wasn't because marijuana was bad. It was because they wanted to go after Black people who were in the middle of a revolution and movement through the late 60s and into the 70s. And they also wanted to go after young white folks who were also anti-war and support of civil rights. And these two groups used marijuana in a way that was social and certainly community building. And I feel like it was a smart decision for the Nixon administration to do that if that was their goal, because if you look at the history, that is essentially what they were able to disrupt. This is a different type of strategy. It's a different type of war. And as a result of that, and I won't get on my high horse too long, but as a result of that, there have been many of us, myself included, that have been really impacted in the way things were governed and policed. In New York, especially with the Rockefeller drug laws and the mandatory minimums, essentially we took people's lives away. Okay. And so now, literally, we took people's lives away. We're still taking lives right now based on the fact that there are still states that are arresting people of color, Black and Hispanic men primarily, in relation to cannabis. And so for me, it is not about arguing about whether or not right now do we need it to be in place. I'm talking about what happened in history and how do we fix that? Because if we all agree it shouldn't have been illegal, then there should be some sort of fix. I've also had a lot of people, and it's the last point I make, talk about the fact that, well, alcohol bootleggers, they were ones who didn't, follow the law, so they got put in jail. You do the crime, you do the time. Well, here's the thing. First of all, there's a lot of things in America that's been a crime. Like, for example, it used to be a crime to learn how to read as a Black slave. So I guess during the time there, it meant
Dasheeda, I think we're having just a little bit of technical difficulties, but I really know the third point is really, really something that I think the people need to hear. So can you just rerun that third point back?
Yeah, sorry in case my audio went out. But basically, what I was saying is that some people say if you do the crime, you do the time. But in our country, we have a very interesting history on what we deem a crime. And for example, it used to be a crime to learn how to read or even teach a Black slave how to read. And the time was being lynched because you learned some letters. So I think we have to be very critical in our thinking, especially if you're a patient advocate. Do not try to give up one for the other. That's not going to help the industry at all. Look at the critical, look critically at what we're calling a crime. And then also, is it a crime and should it be a crime for people to possess it versus this idea of selling it? Bootleggers, by definition, were distributors. They were trying to distribute it. And I don't think, people don't realize, if you look at the data, most of the arrests on the books from the Drug Policy Alliance, 40 years of data, the majority, 80% plus, are possession charges alone. And so, no, we're not talking about trying to just give handouts to people who don't deserve it or to criminals who need to do the time. Bump that, because if that's the case, guess what? We need to clear out the entire White House. We need to clear out a lot of folks who are in charge of these companies, certain CEOs, because I'm sure if we dig deeply into folks' history, there are some things that we're not necessarily going to like and be happy with. I think we have to acknowledge what these laws did to neighborhoods, to communities, to peoples, to families, and try to figure out the best plan to turn it around. It starts with letting more African Americans into the industry, and us not, not trying to pretend like it's not still a struggle. It is, no matter what we report on. Last week we reported on an amazing new Massachusetts Black-owned dispensary finally opening. That's fantastic, but it's one of 10 out of 280 total licensed holders in the state. It's not a good number. It's not a good percentage. So we can take small steps forward, but let's be real. Let's call it what it is. These are baby steps. These are little crawls, right? And we need to admit that and stop trying to sugarcoat the SHIT.
Definitely, I agree. I mean, in 2017, there was a survey that said that the cannabis industry had about less than a fifth of people with ownership and stakeholders. So that were people of color. So that is a broad group as well. So when we say even people of color, is not just necessarily black and brown and Hispanic people. It is Asian people. It is people of Arabic descent. So we are being really just left out of the cannabis industry as a circle. And these people will also tell you that they are the minority in the office, whatever space they go in as well. And I think if we stop pretending like this isn't something that is every single day of our lives that we're fighting in and out of the cannabis industry, it will feel less like a burden or a heavy weight on the shoulder, because it's like, hey, this is literally like the other industry I literally just came from. I get to smoke cannabis to relax me now. So that's just the difference, really. You know what I'm saying?
Ding, ding, ding. But also another big difference, and I'll point this out, and I think that's why this article is so important, that this is a new industry. So we actually have an ability to change it. Guess what? The odds of us starting a Black-owned pharmaceutical company and being able to outpace Eli Lilly, a Pfizer, and a Bristol Myers Squibb is a 0 to none, right? At this
Right.
industry has been around for a while. This is the industry we actually can impact. So we're going to need it on two sides. We need more people of color. We need more Blacks and Hispanics to actually come to the table. And we need more, three sides really. We need more legislators to implement the right bills and laws in place mandating these social equity holds and placements. And the third is we are absolutely going to require goes back into the communities. They actually have that capability of supporting new businesses, but they don't have that many Black and Hispanics in the state that can actually start these businesses. So they don't have a lot of applicants. As a result, they get, it's an L right now, right, on numbers. In Massachusetts, you have the situation where they first started off with no numbers and they didn't have no money. And so it was like, you only got one thing working for you, so it's looking bad. They finally got more people to apply, but the trouble is still the money. And we're definitely seeing that in Oakland. You have some success stories, and I think that's what the point of this article is like, let's not fake the funk. There are some success stories, and you're going to see us get highlighted in the Black enterprises and the Essence, and we are among that group. But let's be real about what the reality is for real Black entrepreneurs entering. This past couple weeks, I was up in Albany with the Black and Puerto Rican legislators for their annual caucus, and there was a panel with all of the registered organizations, the ROs in New York, most of them, along with maybe one other group that was really an entrepreneurial group that is interested in cannabis, or in cannabis rather. And the title of the panel was Cannapreneurship. It was very interesting as I sat there to watch and hear from these really big companies. I don't think of them as entrepreneurs in the truest sense, but then Sheldon, who was the real cannapreneur, is a individual who really hustled to get the funding, hustled to get the money. He's a Black man, by the way, and he was able to get involved in the hemp side. He talked of the real struggle. So sometimes we are mistaking highly financed equity plays for big companies is very different from, you know, the regular Joe Schmo trying to get into the industry as an entrepreneur. There's two different pathways. And so, you know, I think it's important for us to at least highlight that, and to highlight some of the states that are actually trying to make an effort, like New Jersey, even Pennsylvania, for having certain portions of their social equity in play. Additionally, it looks like we just got stuck. It seems like there are also opportunities for us to really define social equity a bit better. Dr. Rachel Knox talks about this all the time, and I couldn't agree more, in that social equity is something that is like a buzzword, and people are not necessarily willing to come together and kind of define it in the right way. And not to say that willing, but it's just like we're all putting our own definitions on it, and every state as a result has a different spin on equity. And so that has been a real challenge as far as I'm concerned. If you don't know and you don't agree on the definition, then when you're going in front of groups of politicians, you sometimes may contradict each other, even though you may have the same exact message that you want to, or the same exact motive and mission. Ultimately, I think what we're going to have to do is come together as a group and define what we actually want to see in social equity. And kind of like me, I'm a business and a science person, so I think of things in frameworks so that they are repeatable, and that's why I came up with this concept of the framework. We'll put the rest of the links inside our comments, but basically this is a great article that highlights that it's not all hunky-dory. We have a lot of ways to go as far as cannabis legalization and social equity is concerned, and because there's no national uniform code to ensure there's social equity in the market, we have a lot of differentiation across each of them, and we'll have to, you know, watch and learn and gather insights from all of them to determine what to do next. It looks as if we have lost our connection with ICE. And so I'm a little bit concerned about jumping into our main topic. For what I will do is say that we will probably move to our main topic for next week. But for now, I want to thank everybody for joining us for She Blaze. We're always on the run, and you can join us every week at 11 a.m. Eastern Time live, or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, or iHeartRadio. You can also catch us on the road on our book tour, Sharing Success in Cannabis, by heading over to Eventbrite and putting Sharing Success in Cannabis. You're going to find any number of our stops. Next up, we have Chicago on February 26th. We will be at the University of Chicago Harris School of Public Policy, and we'll be having an intimate discussion with moi. I'll be signing books. It'll be a great time to educate more folks, students, especially around cannabis. And last but not least, you know that you need to follow me on the WeedHead.com or on the Cannabis CEO on Instagram and Twitter. I look forward to chatting with you guys, and have a great week. Bye.